What's up, everyone? Welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
And my name is Dyl, and we are continuing our series of revisiting Best Picture nominees, and this time we have All Quiet on the Western Front. With that being said, though, we do have a guest, as always. TJ is back after talking about Maverick, a kind of pro-war movie, now to the ultimate anti-war movie. This movie got nominated for Best International Feature, and it made its way to Best Picture, and it had a crazy route on its way here. The film had a very buzzy TIFF premiere, and then it released on Netflix with no buzz at all, and had a major resurgence once the shortlist came out. It had a huge BAFTA haul. I saw it right when it came out on Netflix. So TJ, when did you see this? Did you get the pleasure of seeing this in a theater, or did you watch it at home just like me?
I did watch it at home. I was a little late seeing this, just because, a movie like this can be such a bummer to watch. It's something that everybody should watch, and I was a military history minor in college, so this is something that really is up my alley and is something I should be excited to watch. I have not read the book, though. I feel like I should preface that off the top. And then I have not seen the original movie. I own both, so I am just a bozo and haven't done any of that prior research.
I love this movie. I mean, I don't know if love is the right word for it, because this movie is so horrifying to watch. This movie turns war into an actual horror movie. It's just constant carnage and chaos. So few movies are actually anti-war. There's always still good guys and bad guys. Saving Private Ryan, for example, I would say is not a pro-war movie, but it's not an anti-war movie, because at least they're fighting for something. You see Tom Hanks and all of those characters as heroes. They are saving the day. They are being the good guys. And the thing about All Quiet that makes it a true anti-war movie is that it doesn't show war as heroic. There is no heroism. There are no good guys and bad guys. It's just tragic, and it's a waste of life. We know that these guys that we see, these characters, they're not the good guys in the story. And likewise, we know that the other guys aren't the bad guys. They're not either. These are just working class people who are being used as pawns. The real war here in All Quiet at the Western Front is between the soldiers and the commanders. Mm-hmm. Because as we see through the movie, the people pulling the strings with zero regards for the lives of the characters that we're following, those are the bad guys in the story.
I will admit, I had some mixed thoughts about this movie. I thought that some stuff was phenomenal. I thought other stuff was very lackluster. But no matter what you feel about this movie, I think we all can admit it's an absolute marvel when it comes to the crafts. For me, that makeup work, that's especially there in those first few shots looking at the soldiers on the ground, something I very much noticed this time around. It's some of the best makeup work in the year. I'm very happy it got the Oscar nomination there. And I really, really, really love the costume work here, because especially that opening sequence where you see the boots and the jacket and everything go from the first soldier into Paul. That's some great work there. And then throughout the movie, it continuously gets more and more detailed. But I know there's so many crafts in this movie to really just gawk over. So Matt, do you want to go over a few that just really blew you away to witness?
If we're talking crafts, I have to say the cinematography, for me, I think is the best of the year. I think it hits a perfect balance between being truly beautiful to look at and also not glorifying or glamorizing it. It's a dirty, ugly film, but at the same time, it's shot in a very picturesque way. So I really love that cinematography. Like you said, Dylan, the makeup, best of the year. But I gotta talk about the sound, the editing, just the menage of everything that happens in one sequence in particular. And that's the scene where the tanks approach. That scene is just so, your heart is in your throat the entire time. You can feel your chest just pounding as we see these tanks crawling across no man's land, looking like monsters approaching out of the fog. And then following the tanks and following the chaos that comes from them, suddenly we've got the flamethrowers approaching, ending that entire sequence where you haven't even been able to take a breath after tanks, flamethrowers. Now it's a hand-to-hand melee between Paul and another soldier, and as he kills the soldier, he realizes this is a kid just like me. He doesn't deserve to die. That whole sequence is some of the most gut-wrenching cinema that you can imagine. And if that doesn't convince anyone that war is pointless, I don't know what will.
Well, I mean, even hit on that, like the tanks, the flamethrowers, I guess the evil villain, that evil monster, the mechanization of warfare. I mean, And part of what makes that work, especially considering, like, there's a lot of things historically speaking you could say about this movie. It's like, yeah, well, By 1917, not really. You know, like by then, tank warfare has been established. Nobody's going to look at this and not know what it is. So that it's a little, but then you get that experience, and you're like, oh, totally worth it. It's awesome. That, and then the only other scene I could say that about, I guess, is when they're all like, the schoolboys are giddy. They're like, I'm going to war. It's a great adventure. Yeah, by about 1915, it wasn't called the Great Adventure. It was called the Great War for a reason, man. You know, like, yeah. But to everything you guys are talking about, this movie does so much, so well. And I mean, just capturing that feeling, like going back to what you were talking about with Saving Private Ryan, the last words that Tom Hanks' character says is, earn this, earn it. That movie gives you the exact opposite response that you should have after watching this movie, because you're just like, why would anybody want to do like such a heroic note in Saving Private Ryan, and then there's this, and literally even that like fight, the one that you're just dude, and it's literally that guy, just a person talking to a person. It's not a country to country dispute, and that just like so well and captures what this war really was. And because of that, like, I'm a historian just watching all this shit go down, I'm like, oh my god, they're crushing it. And then the other interesting movie that is to compare this one to is 1917. And I will tell you, 1917 does a great job capturing that point of the war for sure. And the oneer, I mean, come on, that is unbelievable. But because it's a guy on a mission movie more than this movie is a World War I movie, and like feel the brutal nature. And it's also interesting just because you look at World War I, and to me that's like the event that starts the modern world, because everything that has happened over the last century really kind of draws back to some origins there, and of course even further back than that. But it's so interesting to watch the politics of this movie, right? Like, you go from warfare and then you're just as interested watching Daniel Bruhl. Yeah, I can't say enough about this movie. One, as like a film geek, because this movie's awesome, but also like as like a history geek, because it gets so much right.
Like I mentioned before, adore that opening. It, just like how we talked about with Maverick, it really sets the scene for what the rest of the movie you're about to watch is. And it shows you like, hey, you can find someone, latch onto them, but guess what? They're not safe, because war isn't safe. You never know what's around the corner. And that goes for the ending of the movie too. This movie's been out. This is a spoiler review. That final sequence with Paul, and you know the movie's about to end. He's lost everything in his life. You know he's a man on a mission, and that mission is not to go home. And he goes in there giving his all. There's a new youthful soldier that comes, and he kind of takes him under his wing, sort of thing, to be like, hey, you still have a life to live. I'm ruined. I'm deteriorated inside. You're going home. And he essentially gives his life for him, because he jumps in, gets in front of the soldier fighting him. He fights the soldier, and then eventually gets stabbed within the last few seconds of the war. And especially in this rewatch, that moment just hits so much harder, because a big complaint a lot of people had, myself included on the initial viewing, was that the war sequences were so good, it detracted from more of the dialogue heavy scenes, and I didn't really have much of an emotional connection to really anyone, whether it were the soldiers or the people on the other side, the diplomats, you could call them for a lack of a better term. But on this viewing, I really appreciate all that character building between the comrades, because when you're not in the trenches, there's so much great stuff there, especially with Paul and Kat, whether they're going to get the geese or they're going to just have a chat on the toilet because Kat can't read, so Paul has to read his letters to him. Or they're all just cooking dinner with Jaden and some of the other soldiers there. I just thought that on this viewing, I felt so much more connected to all of the comrades than I did the first time. Because the first time I was like, I know their faces, but I don't really know why any of them are here or why they're connected or anything like that. But this time it really worked for me.
How about the one scene where the guy ditches? Like, that scene was so powerful. And like, just to sit with the guys for a second right after that, you're like, shit, he just ditched us, dog. But then they also are just like sitting with the guilt of like, I'd have done the same thing. I'd have dipped. Like, if I could have had that. And like that moment, and I kind of knew what was sort of ahead of me. But yeah, those moments out of the war, honestly, were what makes this narrative so strong. Because you just sit with it. And you know kind of where this is all going to go. And you still get attached to these characters. Like, it's heartbreaking. Yeah, and it's just those little things. And that's the other thing about it. It's just like this situation is so bleak. The smallest stuff makes them so happy. And it's like, wow, could I imagine being in that situation? Could I imagine me being in that spot? No, that's brutal. And of course, with the final sequence, that's what this movie also does a great job of showing, just like how much that just going through this, even if you survive, dude, you're just not the same. Like,
yeah.
You just don't come back the same person, because like, how could you? how could you? And yeah, I mean, just to think about how that's played out in history, and then even just still nowadays, it's still a current issue. It makes you watch this movie and you just feel for vets. Like it sucks.
Yeah. It's shell shock in movie form. Like, it shows you the transformation that these people, like, of course, no one came home from the war the same after this. Like, how would you, like you said, how would you live through this?
Yeah.
And then
how could you deal with a bell going off? Just like if you were in your town and a bell goes off, I
think the point is, even if you did live through this, you'd still come back dead in some way.
I really like that angle of it, because especially the further you go in this movie, as TJ mentioned, all the comrades have originally come so happy, like, oh, we want to be here, and then scene goes on, and eventually one starts to feel less more. Some immediately right away, some a little further down the line, and then you get to the end of the movie, and everyone just hates the fact that they came here and they wish they never came.
Now, I also haven't read the book that this is based on, but our prior guest, frequent guest on here, Arno, he has read the book, and he says that it is entirely different. Basically, the only similarities from the book to this version of the movie is the main character's name being Paul, and it's taking place in World War I. Basically, everything else is different. And
interesting.
I don't care that this is a bad adaptation, because to me, there's a purpose to every adaptation, and you don't always have to try and be, like, literal to the text. The book is its own thing, the original movie is its own thing, and this is also its own thing. I don't think it needs to be a great adaptation to be a great film, and it is a great film. I saw this movie, like the original movie, probably like 7-8 years ago, so a long time ago. I don't remember a ton about it. I remember a few scenes that really stuck with me, but personally, I think this is a step up in every way. I think it conveys the same feelings, the same emotions, but it does it in a much more impactful way. Like, there are images in this movie that are going to be burned into my brain forever, and I can't say the same thing about the original film.
Got it. So I guess moving away from the script and comparing it to the original and everything like that, over to the performances, because I feel like the ensemble of mostly unknown actors here, they knew the assignment and absolutely showcase their best abilities of how brutal and grueling this story is. Because Felix Kramer is someone who I've been saying on the show all season long, I feel like should be in the best actor race. I was really sad he never really showed up anywhere.
Every interaction in this movie, there's great chemistry between the cast too. So like you were saying, Dylan, like this is a lot of names that I'm not familiar with. So I'm really excited to see where this kind of takes these talents, because I don't know how big this was on Netflix, but the fact that it's getting award noms, hopefully that we see these names again, and maybe them interacting once again too. That would be really, really cool. But yeah, no, I mean, it's kind of hard to pick out one standout, because I just think everyone was really, really great. But I think I'll go with Felix.
I say this every time I feel like we talk about performance, but I'm huge on nonverbals, and I just love how both of those actors are able to communicate so much with their eyes. They may not be youthful people, but they have such youthful eyes where they can look like they're actual children, and it really just helps sell and communicate all those bits. I know earlier in the season, Matt, I told you, like, hey, I feel like this could maybe do something. I never thought this could get up to 9 nominations. So I guess I'm going to ask each of y'all what nomination here was just, like, your favorite one. So, TJ, why don't you start us off here?
Man. Sorry in advance, Matt. This might be yours, but cinematography, I feel like that's got to be the answer here. The sound and editing, though, is great. Especially the sound, because, like, it's one thing to see it, but you also you're fully immersed into it, so sound is just as much of it as like the visuals of it. Best adapted screenplay, like I don't know. I feel like this movie uses its time right. Like I don't know. I felt like it was at the right length, and some of that's editing to me, but some of that's also the screenplay. So I mean, it was so great in so many different areas. But cinematography, it's hard to watch a subject matter of this, but it makes it look pretty good, so that's at least 1+.
I mean, Dylan, you probably remember when we were talking about my TIFF roundup, I was saying that in an ideal world where Netflix pushes this film, it could get all of these nominations. I remember saying that and saying, like, this could be this big film if Netflix does something with it. And then Netflix didn't do anything with it. And they just forgot about it. And then somehow it still got all those nominations because the movie's just that powerful. So yeah, TJ, you took it right from me, cinematography. But because you already talked about that, I'll talk about the score. The music is fantastic in this movie. And when I first saw this, when that electronic drone, which someone pointed out, sounds a lot like the backing track of Sean Kingston's Fire Burning. When I first saw the movie, that score right at first was really jarring, and I was like, ooh, I don't know if I like that. But then that feeling that it gave me, that uneasiness, that feeling in the pit of my stomach that was just like, something's wrong about this. That's why it's so right, because it makes you feel like something is not the way it's supposed to be, right? We're seeing this World War One movie with this like hard electronic score to it, and it just works. But even besides that, when the music just fades into the background more and it's more ambient, it's still really powerful, and it just works so well. That score nomination is so incredibly deserving here.
Cinematography, obviously, I know I've kind of digged on it here in the past, saying like, oh, it shouldn't win, but it's still very good work. I've mentioned my pick earlier in the show. It's the makeup work here. War movies, they do get their credit, but they never get to win. And honestly, this may be my winner in the category among our nominees.
Me too.
It's probably not going to win the actual award, but that would be the one where, like, hey, if this movie can only win one award, it would be that, because costumes did not make the nomination list. But overall, most of these nominations I'm very on board with. I wish war movies got a little bit more love for wins in that costume and makeup department. So, talking about the awards that it did got, now let's talk about its chances to actually win, because to win Best Picture, this maybe has a very small chance. It's probably like number 7, 8, or 6, probably in the overall rankings if you're looking at it overall. But we're going to say here in this hypothetical that's a top 3 contender. What would its package be to walk away with Best Picture? Because to me, it would have to be picture, obviously. It would be international feature. It would take cinematography, maybe take one of those smaller ones, and that smaller one could be adapt, and it could be production. Just something else to get its total wins up to 4.
Honestly, I think that this is winning at the very least 2 prizes, because it's winning international feature, and it's gotta win cinematography. Dylan, I know you're on Team Elvis for cinematography here, but like this one, yes, it didn't show up at ASC, but it just won the British Society of Cinematographers. It's going to win at BAFTAs. Because Top Gun's not here, this is the easy choice for cinematography, in my mind. It might not be everyone's favorite, but it's from, Elvis is probably the most popular movie, but I don't think a lot of people talk about the cinematography in that, whereas most people come out of this and go, God damn, that movie looked insane. So I just think it's winning that. But if it were to win Best Picture, I just gotta say, if adapted screenplay comes along, Women Talking doesn't win and this wins instead, that is a sign that this could win. This could win.
I agree.
And especially if it starts picking up some other techs. Maybe Babylon doesn't win score and this gets it instead. Maybe production design in like some huge upset, or makeup, or any of those. If we start to see wins for this in places we don't expect it, yeah, this is a real strong contender. Otherwise, you're probably right. This, it's 1 or 2 wins.
Yeah, that's where I see it at the moment, as on the more realistic side. I just have it for international at the moment, but it's number 2 in cinematography, it's number 2 in sound, and it's number 2 in screenplay. So it's ones where it could easily leap into that leading position, but I just don't have it there at the moment. So TJ, what do you have this winning at the moment?
Yeah, international feature for sure. I don't know. I even like Glass Onion for adapted screenplay over this. Maybe that's just me. Cinematography, yeah, I would prefer this over Elvis. So those would probably be my 2. Yeah, but dude, that's 2 big wins for Netflix though. Those are not Oscars to scoff at. Like these are legitimate wins. Yeah, makeup 2 could definitely be in the mix. So yeah, it's still respectable. So 9 noms, 2 to go with that. Yeah, that's solid. But those are probably the only 2 that I would give it personally.
I just gotta say that I think that this movie, like Top Gun showed how any movie that gets amazing reviews, no matter how not of an Oscar movie it is, it can still make it into the conversation. I think All Quiet shows that Netflix is gonna get a movie in no matter what. No matter what, they're gonna get a movie in Best Picture. And it also shows that maybe campaigns don't really matter as much as we think that they do, because they funneled money into Glass Onion, and what got nominated for Best Picture? This did. They basically forgot about it. So ultimately, I think it's just, if there's the reactions that make it seem like it might be a tech player, even if it's not getting that push, it could still get in.
Yeah, well, even talking about Daniel Bruhl and that part of the movie, it is kind of interesting that, I don't know if you were to say Daniel Bruhl war movie, I don't know if you would just expect his amount of screen time or the role that he's in necessarily, but I still think he was pretty good in this movie. But that, I mean, to me, that is like the weakest of the part. Like if you were to say war, soldiers just outside of war or whatever, those would definitely be like the more interesting parts of the movie. But it's still interesting, especially just considering he's just in a no-lose situation. He's there to surrender. They want it. They want unconditional. Yeah, that's cool, fine. And then it sets up another tragedy right after it, and the negotiations there during the peace process. So, yeah, but not to be a history geek there, but no, and yeah, you're right. This, just like Top Gun Maverick. I mean, why is this such a big Oscar hit this year? I mean, it showcases, hey, just make a good movie, tell a compelling story that hits audiences, and you got yourself in the running.
Yeah, my final point would be to circle back to something Matt mentioned earlier, would be just the duality between the soldiers that are actually in the fight and the generals who are up in their house on the hill. They get to eat the fancy foods, and they still complain about it while the soldiers have to eat whatever's there. And just, I really love that duality that I really noticed more on this rewatch. But with all that being said, I want to thank TJ for coming on the show today, and I want to thank all of you for making it this far in the video. If you have made it this far, please feel free to drop a comment down below with your thoughts on All Quiet on the Western Front. A like, a dislike if you disagree with our thoughts, but until next time, my name is Dyl.
And my name is Matt, and this is Fantasy Filmball.